Hello everyone, I am FIDE instructor and Arena International Master Rishikesh Chavan. Welcome to my YouTube channel. Today in Chess Made Simple, we are going to learn defending against the passed pawn. We have already learned about the passed pawn. So let's see how we can defend against the passed pawn. We'll start with this basic position. So here we are white, and as you can see, white king is far away from this passed pawn, and white black is planning to promote this passed pawn in two moves by moving the king either on a file or b file, c file. Sorry. How we are going to defend the passed pawn? So the correct move is to play bishop b3. Now, after bishop b3, black will have to make a choice. He can move his king to either a1 or c1. If he is going to play a1, then we will be playing bishop c2, and that way we are covering the queening square, and we will sacrifice our bishop for the pawn, and that way it's a draw. And if he moves his king to the c1, then we are going to play bishop a2, and that way again we are controlling the queening square, and we will simply capture the pawn on the next move if he promotes, and then it will be a draw again. Next position, please. Now here again we are black. We are moving towards that side. There are two connected passes of white, and it looks like they are going to promote on the next move. If we think about stopping those passes with moves like bishop g5, then it won't work because they are connected passers. We have already discussed in the past form then that connected passers can't be stopped by a full rook if they are on the sixth rank. Here the passers are already 6th and 7th rank, so one bishop cannot stop them. So here we are going to play c7, and then as you can see, we can promote both the passers one by one, and there is no way black can stop these passers from queening. So bishop g5 is slow or not effective. So we are going to use another way. We are going to play b3 check. Why are we sacrificing the pawn? So after king into b3, bishop a5, and now as you can see, both these squares are controlled by black bishop. Now, and both these pawns are stopped. And while these pawns are stopped, white black will get his king near the pawns, and then it will be a draw very soon. Next position, please. Okay, here black is having this pass pawn on b2 and is going to promote the pawn on the next move. In the first, initially, this position looks very simple. You may think that bishop e4 is going to stop the pawn very easily, but actually bishop e4 is a blunder because there follows f5 double check and the bishop is gone. And then next move, black is getting his queen back. So here white has to find some other way to stop this pawn. White must control the b1 square. So here he is again going to keep his opponent busy, as we have already discussed this concept in defending against double attack, that you have to keep your opponent busy if you want to get extra moves. So here by giving this check, white is keeping his opponent busy. So maybe king g7 and then bishop a2, and finally the b1 square, the winning square, is controlled by white bishop. Let's move ahead with the next position. Here again, two black pawns, they are already on the 7th rank, and it looks like it is very difficult for white to stop both the pawns. But there is a way. The correct move is bishop c4. It's a check, so black must capture the bishop. It's not compulsory actually. He may not capture the bishop, but first let's see what if he captures the bishop, and then we'll see what if he doesn't capture the bishop. So here white will play king into pawn, king c3 forced to defend the pawn, king d1. Finally, the queening square is occupied by the white king, and now white is forced to play king d3, and it's a stalemate. Game ends in a draw. Now, what if black doesn't capture the bishop? That way, he will have to move his king maybe to c2, but then there follows bishop into pawn, and then one passer is gone, and bishop is ready to capture the pawn, or bishop is ready to sacrifice himself on the next move to stop the other pawn from queening. Next position, please. Now this looks bit difficult because the pawn is on the c file. Knight is far away from the action, so it looks like knight can never reach the pawn in time. But white has one trick. White has one more weakness. The correct move is knight d4. Now the first threat or the initial threat is to capture the pawn directly, and if he promotes the pawn, then there is the second hidden threat, which is knight f3 checkmate. So because of this checkmate threat, black may not promote the pawn. He is forced to move his king out from the mating net, and then white will simply capture the pawn, and white is totally winning over here. We'll move on with the next puzzle. Okay. Now what to do? Again, the pawn is going to be promoted on the next move. Only the knight is there to stop the pawn, but as you can see, or knight is a short moving piece or short ranged piece. It's not a long ranged piece like bishop, so it has its limitations. One more negative thing for white is that his king is far away from the action, but here uh, white can draw this game. White can hold this position with some end game concepts. So white is going to play knight a1, knight h1, sorry, to block the pawn. Black is forced to attack the knight so that he can kick the knight away, or maybe he can capture the knight and then he can promote the pawn. But then there follows king e3. The idea behind king e3 is after knight into king into knight, king f2, and it's a stalemate. Black king is stalemated and game will end in a draw. In this position, if he doesn't capture the knight, if he plays something like king g1 to stop this king f2, then white will simply keep moving his knight here and there, or maybe from f2 h1, and then again it will end in a draw very soon. We'll continue with the next position. Okay. This looks a bit challenging because white has a passed pawn on a file. All the pieces are on the other side of the board, though black has a long ranged bishop, but the only square he can defend is a8. White square bishop has no control whatsoever on the dark square. So a8 is the only square where black can stop this pawn. So let's see how he can do it. So the correct move is king e5. Right now it looks like king is moving towards the pawn to capture it, but it's not happening. It's not possible because if you use the rule of square, then you will come to know king is not at all near the square. Forget about being inside the square, he is not even near the square. That way king can never catch the pawn. But there is a hidden trick behind king e5 move. Let's see. Pawn push, and then there follows bishop e6. Why bishop e6? Because now if he promotes the pawn to a queen, bishop d5 is a double attack on king and queen. So white is forced to capture the bishop, and then it's a draw. And what if he doesn't promote the queen? So maybe he will play something like king e3, so that there won't be any double attack coming up on d5. In that case, bishop d5 still works because now the queening square is firmly controlled by the bishop, and that way white cannot win. Even if somehow white manages to control this square, I mean the 8 square, bishop will simply sacrifice himself for that queening pawn, and then the game will end in a draw. Next. Okay. What can be done over here? Again, the same thing. Similar looking position which we just discussed. Queening pawn is on the other side of the board, and the bishop is totally, you can say, maybe on the totally different planet. How to control this a1 square? This is the only square which this dark square bishop can control. So the correct move is king d7. Again it looks like white is just playing for the sake of it. He has no plan because this king d7 is not at all going to stop this pawn march. Black will keep pushing the pawn ahead. King e7, and now the picture gets clear. Now if he promotes the pawn, then there follows bishop f6. it's a skewer, and then the queen is lost. So this way white can save his game. Now here after king d7, or instead of king d7, white can even try playing something like bishop e7 with the same idea, or with the similar idea of playing bishop f8 and then putting the bishop to g7 to control this diagonal and giving this skewer. But this plan won't work because pawn push, bishop f8, and then black has a very cunning move of king f6, and then there is no bishop g7 coming up, and there is no way white can stop this pawn from winning safely, and white will soon resign. There is one more way. For example, after king d7, instead of a2, what he can try, he can play something like king f5. So the idea is moving the king away from this diagonal, so that there won't be any skewer coming up. But then that way the game will continue like this: king e7, a2, bishop f6 forced, king to g4, knight bishop e5, defending the pawn. For now he will promote the queen. White is forced to capture the queen, and then king into g3 is a draw. I think this is the only variation which is suitable for black, where he will come up with a draw. Of course, there is one more variation, but I guess in that variation, white will win with this extra pawn. So as you can see, after capturing the queen on a1, if king comes to g4, the pawn is supported, and now black should lose this game. So here, instead of pushing the pawn, he can move the king first to f5, and then he can attack the pawn with g4 and then capture on g3. Let's move ahead. Okay, so two connected passers. We tried stopping two connected passers with a rook. We tried stopping two connected passers with a bishop. Now here we are trying to stop these passers with the knight. Now it looks like if rook cannot do it, so maybe even knight won't be able to do it. But knight has this special ability of jumping. So we are going to use this ability, and we are going to play knight e4. So our knight in knight e4, we are first of all going to capture this pawn straight away, and that way we will be controlling the other queening square f1. So to do that, he must play g2. So his idea is to promote the pawn on g1, but then there follows knight d2 check. It's a double attack. Any king move, mostly he will move the king towards the pawns or towards the knight. Knight into pawn, and then finally one out of the two passed pawns are gone, and the other passed pawn is firmly defended by the knight. Even if king attacks the knight, this knight will keep roaming around. So for example, king f2, then he will go to knight s3. If he attacks again, then he will come back. If he attacks again from h2, he will move his knight to, maybe suppose something like f3, or even e2 will work. This way the position will keep on revolving around that pawn, and then again very soon either the game will end in a draw due to perpetual attacks, or perpetual check, or it will end because of threefold repetition. We will conclude this chapter with this very tricky position. Again, white black has this passed pawn on the a file. Bishop is somewhat close to the pawn, but king is far away. On the other hand, black king is close to the pawn. So it looks bit difficult for white to defend the pawn, because king can easily attack the bishop and kick him away from the squares. And once bishop is out of these two squares, he can simply start pushing the pawns, and it's a queen very soon. So let's see what he can do. King b1. Now sorry, bishop b1. Bishop b1 is the only move which saves the game for white. Here white is threatening bishop a2, so the pawn will be stopped permanently on this diagonal, and to stop that, black must play king b3 to stop this pawn push. So again it looks a bit losing for white, because this king will be attacking the bishop very soon, and once this bishop is gone, he will start pushing the pawn ahead. At least this is what black is thinking, but white has all the plans covered. King d3. Here black cannot push the pawn because then bishop will sacrifice himself for a pawn and it's a draw. So he will try to dislodge the bishop first, and then there comes this winning move, bishop a2. Now after bishop a2, if he captures, king c2, and you already know this, it's a rook file pawn. So this king won't allow this black king to come out of these two squares, and if he cannot come out, then he cannot push the pawn to the a1 square, and soon enough it will be a stalemate. For example, let's roll this position ahead. King c1, again stopping the king from coming out. Here this will also work, because after this move he will have to push the pawn ahead. King will come back to c2, and then it's a stalemate. King c1, king c1 also works. Forced, if he moves the king up, like something like king a2, then white will continue with king c2, and again if this keeps on repeating, then the game will end in a draw because of perpetual moves, or we can say threefold repetition. So here maybe he will push the pawn ahead, and now after king c2, it's a stalemate. Black's king is stalemated and white saves the game. So these are the few ways to defend against a passed pawn. I hope you understood all the concepts we have discussed. I hope you can use this concept in your tournament play or practice games. So see you next time. Thank you very much.